ships were ruined. And how do you do? Hi, Ernie.
How you doing, Bob?
There's a chair there. Destroyed the ships, and they tried all kinds of things. They pitched them. Periodically they'd beach the ship, turn it over on its side with a capstan, scrape the barnacles and the torpedo worms off, but it was a real problem until they finally found the solution, which I'll get to in a minute. I copied this down. This is a bit of swamp history. Dr. Miller's plantation, as farms were called in those days, a site was on the northeastern edge of the Stone Hills. Originally, I intended to project a Google map and show where all these different sites are. I can't do that. The keyboard on my computer just went out. So anyway, the Stone Hills are the hills just north of Schwenksville. Some of you know just where that is. Right north of Schwenksville, the Stone Hills, where in 1732 copper mines were operating. The deed granted by Murray and Budd retained for themselves. This deed goes to the land that we're located where the current Perkins Valley Middle School is, down along Route 73 on the right, the new middle school before you get to Schwenksville. That's the site where we're talking about here. They're heirs of the signs. All the mines and minerals on or within the hereby granted land, with the free liberty of ingress and egress, and regress into and out of the same, enter the digs, the same mines, and also the rakes, pits, levels, and erect any buildings on the said land for the convenience of getting the said mines and minerals. Whether there's ever any copper mine in that site is not known. But the point is, and the reason I put this up is, those copper mines are so valuable that when you sold the land, you retained the rights, the owner retained the rights to the copper mine. You didn't sell the mines, you sold the land, everything around the mines. So, let's see now, if I can make the S. Copper, at this time, the copper that was mined here was found in veins. It was mined in veins. Some were as wide as a hand, like this one, and others were wider. Some could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 feet wide. How did the copper veins form, and where did they come from? Well, the geology of this period is convoluted and ancient. Are there any geologists here? Oh, good, isn't it? Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I was going to say, there's nothing worse than somebody that knows what they're talking about to a historian, because they mess everything up. They mess the whole story up when you get somebody that really knows what they're talking about. Well, you can correct me where I go wrong. How did the copper get there? Time was. If you go back almost 1 billion years, the continents, as we know, are floating around on a semi-liquid sea of magma. They come together, collide, form other continents, break apart. We're talking about a long geologic time. The area that we're on here now, when the continents come together, there'll be subduction. One will go underneath the other. The one continent gets kind of folded up like pushing a rug against a wall. It subducts underneath the other. When it is down there, the material semi-melts, fuses, forms. Comes up to the surface again, eventually. The Appalachian Mountains at one time were higher than the Rockies. And it's the second set of mountains that were on the eastern shore, the eastern seaboard of the eastern area of the North Atlantic continental plate. There was another set of mountains before that. The Manayunk Hills are stubs or stumps from the set of mountains before the Appalachians. We're going back into ancient time. Maybe the Pangea, as you probably know, when all the continents were pushed together, broke up about 200 million years ago. That is, if you take all the... When I was a kid in 3rd grade, looking at a map, I noted that these continents all fit together like pieces on a puzzle. This fits over, South America fits over into Africa, this fits up in here, this fits up in here. One time they made it all together. Well, the teacher, of course, said, like a good teacher, gosh, sit down, that's stupid. But that was exactly what it was. Around 200 million years ago, those continents broke up and pulled apart. And are still doing that. The North American continental plate is subducted under the Pacific plate, which is why we have the San Andreas Fault in California. And we're moving west a few millimeters a year. Anyway, so how did the copper veins form? Deep underground, at some time, when the area around here was subducted under another plate or thereabouts. Water, seawater, gets superheated under great pressure to maybe thousands of degrees. That superheated seawater absorbed, or rather dissolved in that water were minerals like copper. And as it came up through vents and cracks in the earth, it cooled, the pressure lessened, and the metals precipitated out. And along a channel with a superheated metal-rich seawater came up, you have veins. Is that right? Does that sound right?
Most of the veins are in rocks that are Triassic age,
Okay.
which are 200 million years old.
Yes, the Triassic rocks. And this area where we are now was right about on a seam when the North Atlantic plate pulled apart from Pangaea. There was a rift and magma came up, right? And this is deep underground. The magma never reached the surface. If it would have been a volcano and you'd have lava. But as it was deep underground, cooled slowly over eons of time. And what we have are these hard granite boulders of the Stone Hills and back around Montgomery County Park. And that chain of boulders, that magma starts up around Nova Scotia, goes down here, goes through the Devil's Den at Gettysburg and peters out somewhere down the line. But that was a rift. That was a rifting in the earth when the North American plate pulled away from Pangaea about 200 million years ago. And these copper veins formed then. I have a question for you. In the copper ore, there's a significant amount of gold and silver. Gold and silver are noble metals, and they do not form oxides and salts. So how did the gold and silver get carried in the water?
They're a trace constituent in the mineral chalcopyrite, which is a copper iron sulfide mineral. It's the chalcopyrite.
It was a part of another. It was part of another mineral,
Right.
okay? Because there's significant amounts of gold and copper in here too, in those veins. Yes.
The intrusions you speak in the Triassic sedimentary rock, and that's what it is. The gentleman's correct. It's mostly Triassic